In part 2, I want to explore critical analysis a lot further by taking a more extensive example from actual academic writing. We're going to go through 3 paragraphs and then section by section we're going to unpack the paragraph and see if we can identify where the critical analysis is occurring. So first paragraph. According to the Nursing and Midwifery Council, the aim of clinical supervision is to bring practitioners and skilled supervisors together to reflect on practice, to identify solutions to problems, and most importantly, to improve standards of care. Research states that clinical supervision is more effective if sessions are booked on a regular basis and last for at least 60 minutes or more. However, as Aurora observes, this may not always be possible due to shortages of staffing and resources. Now I'd like you to pause the video if you wish to see if you can reread that paragraph 1 and identify where in the paragraph you think the analysis is taking place, and in the light of part 1 of this video series, see if you can identify what definition of critical analysis you would apply to your observations. Okay, so looking at the first part of this opening paragraph, I've highlighted the second part of that opening sentence, that the aim of clinical supervision is to reflect on practice, to identify solutions to problems, and most importantly, to improve standards of care. You'll notice that the writer is offering a rationale, a reason for the importance of clinical supervision, and they're doing it by considering components and in addition looking at the relative merits of the components. They're in fact bringing together 2 of our definitions of critical analysis. The second part of that opening paragraph, I've highlighted an important key word, that word however. I will be showing you some other keywords and phrases at the end of this video, but you can see that such a simple word as this, as however, heralds what is about to be some sort of analysis. And here they're highlighting that there may be potential problems. In this case, that sessions occurring on a regular basis for an appropriate amount of time may not always be possible due to shortages of staff and resources. So this idea of potential problems is coming in. Okay, I want to go on to the second paragraph and we'll do the same as before. A key component of effective clinical supervision is the supervisor-supervisee relationship. According to Summers et al., a key barrier to the effectiveness of clinical supervision can be the confusion as to its purpose, particularly with regard to supervision being viewed primarily as a managerial tool rather than as a strategy for personal and professional growth. Several authors indicate that many nurses still view clinical supervision negatively as a managerial tool linked to appraisal and overseeing. And again, you might like to pause this, read through one more time yourself and see if you can identify the critical analysis taking place. Okay, opening statement starts with the phrase a key component. This idea of considering the components and the relative importance of components is being used once again to show critical analysis. In the second part of paragraph 2, I've highlighted another useful keyword, that word barrier. Here it's held in the idea that we're about to discuss potential issues, potential problems that will prevent the effectiveness of clinical supervision to be carried out. And in the third part of that, in this final section of paragraph 2, I'm highlighting the idea that researchers have raised the possibility that many nurses still view clinical supervision negatively. In other words, it's raising a potential problem. Okay, on to our final paragraph. However, clinical supervision has also been perceived by some as a form of counselling or therapy. These misunderstandings about the role and purpose of clinical supervision can give rise to a great deal of anxiety for both the supervisor-supervisee. According to Connor, the greatest cause of this anxiety relates to the perceived lack of power ascribed to the supervisee. To counteract this, it is suggested supervisors need to be specifically trained so they are not perceived as managers overseeing practice and monitoring staff activity. And once again, you might like to pause the video to see if you can identify where you think analysis is taking place. And I'll forewarn you that there is a more advanced version of critical analysis taking place at one point in this paragraph. Right out the gate, there's that useful keyword again. However, the writer states that clinical supervision has also been perceived by some as a form of counselling or therapy. This could be seen as a positive or negative. Here, at the very least, is being presented as a potential issue, whether we decide it's a positive or negative issue. The second part of this third paragraph certainly raises a barrier, a potential issue, but it does so in a way in which it proposes how they can have a causal consequence. So the component that is being considered, in this case the misunderstandings that can arise about the role and purpose of clinical supervision, might cause a great deal of anxiety, and according to Connor, one cause of this anxiety tracks back to a perceived lack of power ascribed to the supervisee. But again, they're using the idea of components, and now we're beginning a potential consequence, what might happen as a result of, in this case, a misunderstanding. And the final part, I've highlighted that opening statement to counteract this. It is suggested. So here the writer is proposing at least elements of a potential solution. To counteract what has been discussed preceding, supervisors need to be specifically trained so they are not perceived as managers overseeing practice and monitoring staff activity. I'm not claiming that critical analysis is not subtle, but I'm hoping that these three paragraphs discussed in the detail I have done at least alerts you to the idea that those suggested definitions I offered can be quite helpful in both spotting critical analysis, and of course the flip side is it would help you in putting critical analysis into your writing. Now I want to think about improving your own writing with critical analysis, and I want to offer a guiding principle, and that is that you should say less, talk more. What we mean by this is that you should highlight and discuss perhaps fewer concepts, fewer points, but discuss them in more depth. It's very difficult to critically analyse a large number of concepts because we are always limited by a word count. So a useful and I think important strategy is to select, cherry pick out those issues you think are the more important ones and discuss them in more detail. I also want to offer you a series of questions that you can ask yourself that will help you insert analysis. This is a common one, the idea of the so what. Why am I saying this? Why am I highlighting this? What is the point of this particular piece of information? Also, who says so? Very important in all academic writing is that you should provide evidence of the original author of the ideas that you are now discussing, that you are now critiquing. And finally, but certainly not least, how does this point, how does this concept relate to this assignment? In other words, make sure that you are continually mindful of the relevance of what you are discussing. Okay, final slide. I want to share with you a few keywords and phrases that I've come across, that I've used, and I would invite you to look for more that might help you make your writing more critically analytical. Simple keywords we've already seen, like however, and the idea of a key component we've already seen, but you can see just reading down there how these phrases, these words clearly are heralding that we're about to go beyond the merely descriptive. We're about to discuss in greater detail, in greater depth, what is happening in the writing. Once you get the hang of critical analysis, you'll start to see other ways in which it is coming out in people's writings, and you'll start to be able to mimic and then eventually gain a certain ownership over critical analysis in your own writing. It isn't something that comes necessarily quickly, but it certainly will come with practice. It's the kind of thing also where getting a friend, a colleague, your tutor to read through parts of your writing can help you decide to see if your analysis is clear enough, is clearly present, and if it's at sufficient depth. Now, these two videos, part 1 and part 2, have only been a basic introduction to critical analysis. It is by no means the last word, and I have by no means used the only definitions that are out there for critical analysis, but hopefully it can act as a springboard to further evolution and development and effectiveness of your writing. Thank you for listening.